Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's time for class online. All right, so I wanted to tell everybody my initial plan, and I don't really know how it's gonna go. But the plan is that I'm gonna make little videos that teach about the lesson that you can watch, like whenever you want. And then when we have our designated online class time, you'll have already watched the video, and then we can spend the class time answering questions that I'm gonna come up with and having like a discussion and talking about examples like we always do. Okay, so that's the idea. We're gonna do a review question from the previous lesson. And so I'll read you the question, give you some time to think about it, and then at the end of the video, I'll tell you the answer to the question. Okay, so that way, yeah, you probably won't want to stick around, but you have to, so. Okay, so after the question, then we will have a segment where I teach you the new stuff. So we'll go over what the words are for the day, and then talk about the definitions of each of those words. Then at the end, we'll do the answer to the review question, the big reveal, and that'll be the video. So that's my idea, and we'll see how it goes. So today, we're gonna review lesson 1 that we did last week. So last week, we did the sectors of the economy. So we had the primary, the secondary, the tertiary, the quaternary, and the quinary. All right, so I would go ahead, get your notebook out as you try to process that, remember what all those words mean, and then answer this question. All right, the question to review, lesson 1, is which of the following would be classified as a secondary economic activity? Okay, so the question is, which one of the following will be classified as a secondary economic activity? All right, ladies and gentlemen, your answer choices are A, engineering, B, coal mining, C, teaching, D, car manufacturing, or E, politics. All right, so one more time. Your answer choices are A, engineering, B, coal mining, C, teaching, D, car manufacturing, or E, politics. So take a minute to think about that, and I will tell you the answer at the end of this video. All right, guys, so the words for this lesson are factory location factors, Alfred Weber's least cost theory, and weight losing industries, and weight gaining industries. Well, I want to make a really bad joke about like The Biggest Loser or something, but that show's not relevant anymore, so anyway. Okay. So we decided that word number 1 is going to be factory location factors. So under that, the first one, letter A, is going to be situation factors. All right, so we're going to have A, situation factors, and B, site factors. So situation factors are going to be the costs that include the transportation of the materials to and from the factory. Then we're also going to have site factors. Site factors are the costs of the labor, so how much you have to pay the people, and the cost of the land. All right, so that's site factors, the cost of the people and the money and the land. So in the thing that we're going to learn today, the majority of it focuses on, for right now, situation factors. So we're going to be looking at the cost of transportation and how that affects where the factory is located. And then later on in a different lesson, we'll discuss how the site factors, like how much you pay the people and how much the land costs, we'll discuss that in a later video, on a later lesson a little bit later. That's a lot of laters, okay. Cat interruption. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of bloopers with the cat. That's gonna be a thing. Alrighty, okay, so word number 2 is Alfred Weber's least cost theory. So I don't know how much you know about languages, but maybe you already knew that Alfred Weber was going to be German. some of you aren't going to be shocked that another one of the people that we study in this class is from Germany. Okay, so you can like go through your mind about the other people that we already learned about, like von Thunen and other people that were German. So don't know why, but they have a lot of theories. Oh, Alfred Weber is this German guy, and in 1909, so a really long time ago, 1909, he wrote a theory of industrial location. All right, so Alfred Weber, maybe I'll put up a picture of him right now so you can see what it looks like. That'll be exciting, okay? So Alfred Weber, theory of industrial location, 1909, German economist kind of guy, okay? So that's the background of word number 2. So he had a theory about like a pattern, basically, about where factories are going to be located. When the company has to decide where they're going to put the factory, he noticed a pattern, which all geographers do, we know that. So he noticed a pattern of where the factories keep being located. And so he decided that there were kind of like 2 different categories that you could put the factories into based on what they need. Basically, his theory is about least cost. Least cost of what? Least cost of the transportation. So he says that the companies are going to look at trying to minimize their transportation costs as much as possible. All right, for word number 3, it's the first of the 2 categories. So the first of the 2 categories is a weight-losing industry. A weight-losing industry, or sometimes, because geography class loves multiple names for things, so it's either called a weight-losing or bulk-reducing. So it's important that you write both of those things down and think of them as being the same. Don't think that there's like 4 categories of different kinds of factory locations. There's only 2 categories. The first category is weight losing, also known as bulk reducing. All right, so word number 3 is a weight losing industry. All of the examples for factories in this kind of industry, the main premise is that the things that go into the factory are bigger and heavier than the things that come out of the factory. So that's the name, right? In the process of being manufactured, the thing loses weight and actually physically weighs less. So that means that the product at the end is easier to transport because it's not as big or as bulky as the thing that it began as. Some examples for you. If something is going to be weight losing, a good, easy example is paper. When you make paper, you have to start out with huge logs of trees that come on trucks to the factories. And then through that process, the trees are all cut up and made into like a pulp, basically, and mixed with water. And the starch in the wood, whatever, creates the paper. So stacks of notebook paper are going to be a lot easier to transport than the trees themselves. Okay, so in that case, the factory would be located near the trees. Another example is the copper industry. So in the copper industry, you have to, actually mine the copper from the copper mine, and then you have to put it through a lot of steps where it gets refined and melted and all these things. And at the end, the, copper that we get that's made into pipes or things like that is really, really pure and a lot smaller than the big chunks of copper that came out of the ground because that was mixed with other things. So through the process, the copper got smaller and smaller and smaller, and then that's why it's weight losing. Another good example is steel. Steel needs 4 different things to be made. Okay, so to make steel, you need to have iron ore, you need to have limestone, you need coal, and you need water. So obviously, this one is for sure a bulk reducing industry because it started off with all of those big, huge, heavy rocks, and then through the process, it gets melted, and in the end, you get steel. Okay, which is a lot, like you could put it into different forms and it's a lot easier to transport. Okay, so because you started off with those 4 different things and you melt them all up and mix them together and stuff burns off, and then in the end you get steel. So historically in America, steel was made in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? Thus the Steelers. It was made there because those four things were in close proximity to Pittsburgh. So the man who owned Carnegie Steel, Andrew Carnegie, he didn't want to have to pay a lot in transporting, especially the really like high loss materials. So three of the things in the process basically like get like all burnt up. And so you don't really want to have to transport really heavy things that you're going to lose in the process really far. Okay, I forgot to tell you guys that in the AP Human Geography review book, which hopefully you'll have at your houses, if you go to page 371 until the top of page 373, it explains all this stuff about Alfred Weber and his least cost theory and the two different categories of where you put factories. Okay, so make sure you open this up, look at the charts, and read over the information there as well. Another example, in the same way, over in Europe, there's a place in Germany called the Ruhr Valley, and I'll put it up on the screen how you spell Ruhr because you won't be able to guess. And so the Ruhr Valley is in Western Germany, and that's where they made all the steel because for the same reasons they had the coal mines that were necessary to for the inputs to make the steel. We should just know that historically Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania was the center for steel, and the Ruhr Valley in Germany was the center for steel. So to bring it back to Weber's least cost theory, the reason that weight-losing industries locate near the raw materials is because the inputs are heavier than the outputs. Okay, so to minimize the transportation costs, you want to put your factory as close as you can to the heavy things. Okay, so in this case, the weight-losing industries, they are making sure that their number one priority is locating their factory near the inputs. Okay, so it's all about proximity to the inputs whenever it's a weight-losing industry. So word number 4 is a weight-gaining industry. So word number 3 was weight-losing. Word number 4 is the opposite. It is weight-gaining. Okay, this time, because through the process, what's happening is that your product is putting on weight through the process. So the final product is heavier. If the final product is heavier, then you don't want to locate the factory near the input. You want to locate the factory near something else. So we don't care about proximity to inputs this time. This time we care about proximity to the market. For market, you have to remember back to von Thunen's model, how we said that circle number 1 was the market, right? The market are the people. So really in 2020, that means the market is the city where you're gonna sell your product or an area where there's a lot of cities. Okay, so for word number 4, weight gaining industry, you're gonna locate your factory near where a lot of people live because your final product is heavier or bulkier than what you started with. And we always want to minimize transportation costs, right? That's what Weber's theory is all about, minimizing the transportation costs so that the companies can save the most money. A really great example of a weight gaining industry is the soda industry. The final product is a lot heavier than the beginning product. Okay, it's heavier because as it goes through the factory, it gets put into bottles or cans. So the bottles or cans are a lot heavier at the end than what you started off with at the beginning, which was like the sugary syrup. So as you go through the process of making the soda, once you put it into its final package, it weighs more. So you don't necessarily want to make your soda in a place that's really far away from people because then you're going to have these really heavy trucks transport them all across the country. Okay, so you're going to locate your factory near the people if you have a weight gaining industry. All right, the second example of weight gaining is car manufacturing. So as you're making a car, it has a lot of different pieces, right? And the pieces might be made all over the world, right? The pieces don't really need to be made in the same country as where everything is assembled. But where the car is assembled needs to be close to the consumers. So obviously, like, China buys a lot of cars because there's a lot of people. America buys a lot of cars, and Europe buys a lot of cars. So car manufacturing, the place where they put all the pieces together, are in those places. So the little pieces that make up the car might be made in the country where the car manufacturer is really from, but then the little pieces might be shipped to America. But in America, that's where you're going to have the factory where they're going to put and assemble all the pieces to make the final car. You don't want to, if you have a Toyota, you don't want to make the entire car over in Japan. If you made the entire car in Japan, then you would have to ship the whole car over to America, which would be way more expensive than just shipping the little pieces, like maybe the electronic components that go into the car. So they might make those in Japan and then ship them all separately, and then America assemble all the really big pieces, because the car is way heavier than all the little pieces coming from separate places. Okay, so cars are weight gaining because at the end of the factory process, a full car weighs a lot more than all its little individual pieces. All right, guys, so the last thing to know is about another kind of factory that will locate near the people, and that is if they're making perishable goods. So the book gave 2 examples, like bread and milk. For bread and milk, they're also bulk gaining, but you would also want to make sure your factory is located near the people, because bread can get stale and milk can get sour. Okay, so also bread and milk you need to locate near the people. All right, so I want to do a quick recap. So we did 4 words today. First word was factors for locating your factory, and that had to do with situation factors and site factors. Situation factors were about transportation costs. Site factors were like the things like on site, like how much you pay your people, how much it costs to get a loan, and how much the land is. So then word number 2 was Alfred Weber's least cost theory. So he's this German economist guy who lives in 1909, writes a book about it, is looking at the world, looking for patterns, and he's saying, hey, wait, I see something here, right? There's kind of like 2 reasons why factories locate where they do. Either it's because they need to save money by locating near the heavy inputs, or they need to save money by locating near the people so they don't have to transport their heavy outputs very far. Okay, so Alfred Weber had a theory that it's all about minimizing your transportation costs with your goods. The words 3 and 4 then were just the different categories. So weight losing industry, where the final product is lighter than the beginning product. And number 4, weight gaining, where the final product is heavier than what you began with. All right, so those are the words for this lesson. Okay, so I want to end every lesson with going back to the quiz question. So the quiz question was, which of the following would be in the category of a secondary economic activity? Okay, which is a secondary economic activity. All right, so I hope you wrote down the choices, but let me go back to them. Okay, so it was either A, engineering, B, coal mining, C, teaching, D, car manufacturing, or E, politics. All right, so the answer is D, car manufacturing is a secondary activity because the secondary sector of the economy involves manufacturing or industry, and obviously car manufacturing is in secondary. And look, that all applied to today's lesson because today's lesson was all about factories. So everything we talked about today involves the second level of the economy, also known as the secondary level. I don't know, I see a lot of YouTubers going like, see ya. See ya. Okay, I don't know if I talk about this or not, so I'm gonna do it again. Okay, something really far away from the people. I'm like really worried now.